Hello and welcome to Heroic Media. I'm Michelle Bauman.
And I'm Patrick Cordova.
This week on Heroic Media, the House passes a bill effectively banning abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy.
As the Supreme Court considers same-sex marriage, one columnist looks at the possible effect on Christian colleges.
And a blind woman sees her unborn baby for the first time thanks to 3D technology.
Stay tuned for all these stories and more here on Heroic Media. So here at Heroic Media, we explore news headlines that deal with foundational moral issues related to family, marriage, and life.
Exactly, and those issues tend to revolve around abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, and homosexual marriage.
Exactly. So what's our first story?
Thanks, Patrick. First for today, the U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill that would ban most abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy, based on evidence that the unborn child can feel pain.
Good stuff. This was a great pro-life victory. And it went not without some turbulence, right? Because earlier, a few months prior to it being passed by the House, there was some kind of disruptions and things like that. We weren't sure if it was actually going to happen or not. It ended up getting taken off the table, but then got reissued, kind of restructured a little bit, and then ended up passing. So that's great news.
Exactly, and I think this type of legislation is really important. There's some question about whether it could actually make it to become a law. It's been brought up by the House before. President Obama has said that he will veto it.
Right.
But I think it does raise that awareness, and then it forces people to be on the record, on the books for voting for it or against it, and it kind of holds people accountable. And it's the reason that 20 weeks is picked is that there's evidence that that's the point at which an unborn child can feel pain. And so you actually have babies who respond to stimuli, who pull away, who sort of react the way that we would if we were experiencing pain from various different things. They do fetal surgery where they actually go in and they use anesthesia, that kind of thing. So so it's a common sense bill, I think. And the sponsor, Representative Trent Franks from Arizona, he was saying, it's not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. This is a test of our own humanity and who we are as a human family. And I think that's so true, that this isn't a partisan thing. This doesn't have to be about one party or the other. It should be common sense that you can't kill a human person and a child who is capable of feeling pain.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a great point, when you're just explaining things, how, the baby will feel, react to stimuli and things like that and can sense pain. I couldn't help but think like, that's so weird that a blob of tissue can do that, right? Like people try to justify away what, even now, and that's the thing that amazed me, especially about this bill, when the House passed it, and you're right, it's a bipartisan, it can be Democrats and Republicans, voting together on this, and it's common sense, and it's common human decency, right? Especially, and what surprises me the most is that even with these facts and things like that, people try to hide behind it, like pro-abortion feminists and people of that nature, people that support abortion, even despite these facts, still try to justify why, they just basically hide behind this facade and certain buzzwords and things like that, like choice and those types of things. They still hide behind it, even despite the facts. And so that was one of the things that surprised me the most is right after this was passed, there was so much outrage from those pro-abortion groups, and I'm like, how can you deny these facts? And it really is beginning to show, kind of, in my opinion, their heartlessness around. They don't care that the baby feels pain. They just want to make sure that their problem is taken care of.
And the pro-abortion movement really tries to paint the pro-life movement as extreme, and what an extreme measure you're taking away, this right from women. But this is really interesting. The U.S. is one of only 7 countries that allows elective abortions after 20 weeks.
Right, so most countries don't.
The vast majority of countries do not. Even countries that are pretty liberal with their abortion policies, most of them have some type of restriction as it gets later in the pregnancy that says, no, this is too much. At this point, it's very clearly a baby. You can see this baby. In many cases, the baby is able to survive outside the womb.
Yep, baby's viable.
It's not okay to kill this baby. At 20 weeks, the eyelids are starting to open. So you have distinct eyelids. You find out if it's a boy or a girl right about in that time. And so that there's so much that this baby has a heartbeat. They're very developed by this point that it really is hard to deny the humanity of this child at this point.
Right, and yet that's what they try to do, is they try to deny the humanity and dance around issues. And I think that's why it's so important, like you were saying, like pointing out the functions that a baby has at that stage, and all the development that's occurred, and seeing ultrasound pictures and things like that. All those pieces of information come together and form a good picture of how can you in good conscience not vote yes for this, right? And so one of the things also that comes to mind on this story is just all of the people that I spoke with that were Obama supporters, like, oh no, he's totally pro-life, he'll support pro-life initiatives, and he's already vetoed, said, I'm going to veto this if it gets past the Senate, right? So I think this is just, like you were saying, it's nice to have like a clear, here's what they said and here's what they did on this such an easy issue. And I see where the pro-abortion people are coming from. They know that this is, and I think this is a good method and strategy for the pro-life movement, to kind of chip away at abortion until it's gone. Because just trying to get rid of it all at once, I think is too much. But this is a great first step in saying, hey, this baby feels pain. Don't we have enough decency to say, listen, let's not inflict pain on another human being?
Right. If nothing else, even if this doesn't go anywhere in the Senate, which it might not, but if nothing else, this raises awareness. Maybe people are going to be reading in the news, oh wow, a baby can feel pain at 20 weeks, and then they start learning more about fetal development. So the awareness that this raises is also really key.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. All right, in our next story, if the U.S. Supreme Court rules in favor of same-sex marriage this summer, it could lead to a shattering of finances for religious schools. So what in the world does the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage have anything to do with religious school finances?
It's a good question. It's kind of a tangled web.
It is. It's kind of a tangled web. And when you first hear about this, you're like, how are these, how do these relate to each other? And really, to understand where things are going, we have to look back to 1983. And in 1983, at Bob Jones University, there was a case. And what that case did was it was a federal case that struck down religious freedom, essentially, in this particular instance. And so BJU, they had their IRS tax-exempt status revoked. And the reason that the government revoked it was because of BJU's stance on interracial marriage and dating and everything like that. And so what the government ruled was that, no, the government's, they said, of course, they defended it on religious grounds. And the government said, no, what the government is trying to do in eradicating those types of sentiments and feelings towards interracial marriage and things like that, us eradicating that is more important than your religious freedom. So they lost. BJU lost. And so what's going to happen, what they want to do, and the question that's posed. So, for instance, Justice Alito posed a predictable but a revealing question to Solicitor General Donald Verrilli, Jr., and he said, in the Bob Jones case, the court held that a college was not entitled to tax-exempt status if it opposed interracial marriage or interracial dating. So, would the same apply to a university or college if it opposed same-sex marriage? So, if the government rules on same-sex marriage in favor, then what does that mean for the tax-exempt status for all these religious organizations? Could they reference this case and say, listen, the federal government has ruled, this is what they want to do, therefore we're going to pull all your tax-exempt, or your tax-exempt status, effectively crushing the schools.
And that is a complicated situation.
It is.
It could get really messy. So just to recap what's happened with the Supreme Court so far,
yes,
we had a ruling already from the Supreme Court that said federally, the federal government is just going to follow what each state decides as far as marriage.
Yes.
Now the court this summer is considering another question that could influence whether gay marriage is a right that everyone has to recognize across
at a federal
the board.
level.
And so that would force redefinition on everybody, all the states, everyone. And if that happens, what's going to happen to the schools that don't recognize it? And the reason that the tax-exempt status is so important, there's a couple different things going on here.
Yes.
First of all, the accreditation agencies could force colleges to comply with this. And in many states, the colleges can't operate without that accreditation.
Yes.
And that's also necessary for people to be able to transfer or do later degree work after they get their degree. So accreditation is very important.
Yep.
And also federal financial assistance is key here. In 2012, more than 70% of college students received public aid. And so if the government says, we don't like your stance on marriage, we're not going to allow anyone at your school to receive public aid, that could effectively bar most students from going
being able
there.
to attend school there because they can't afford it.
Exactly. And then you have the schools that don't accept the government funding, that say we're going to do it on our own because we don't want these.
And you would think that that would be okay on the surface, but it's not.
But it's not, because of with the tax exempt status, they're relying on donors who oftentimes are relying on getting that tax break
exemption,
from it. So,
or tax break rather.
And so what Michael Ferris, who is the chancellor at Patrick Henry College, in writing this column, he said, Christian colleges and churches need to get prepared. We must decide which is more important to us, our tax exemption or our religious convictions. So sort of an idea of some of the things that we could be facing in the future here.
Right, and to me it almost seems like systematic, like it was a systematic, it's a systematic approach, like the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and just how they're defining all these things and pushing basically their morals on all these organizations. And it seems to me like they're effectively trying to wipe out they could wipe out, Christian colleges, and for that matter, even non-Christian colleges, right? Just any college that says that at some level has some sort of teaching that says that same-sex marriage is immoral. They go, oh, you believe that same-sex marriage is immoral or doesn't exist or isn't a real thing? Well, we're going to pull your funding, and basically that forces the college to close. So yeah, it is a good question. What's more important? Right? To have that tax exemption or to have religious convictions, right? To hold your religious convictions. But man, it's just such a difficult position that schools and colleges have worked themselves into, right? Because they are, in the vast majority of cases, it seems like, very reliant, like you illustrated earlier, on federal funding or on or on donations, and both of which are how they all survive, and those methods could be taken out. Both.
And it's so interesting just looking at where we're at, because the history of religious freedom in our country, it was such a foundational thing. People came to this new country because they wanted the ability to have the freedom to practice their religion without interference from the government. They wanted free speech. The university system in our country was based on this idea that you could go in and teach different things. You weren't being controlled by the government saying what you had to teach or what you couldn't teach. So it's just really interesting to see the shift here. This is something that is slowly happening, but becoming something potentially radical.
Yes, exactly. Hopefully we'll have a good ruling.
Coming up after the break, we'll have a special guest to talk about the impact of ultrasounds on abortion.
Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Heroic Media. In case you're just joining us, I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman. In our next story, technology allows a blind woman to see the ultrasound image of her unborn baby.
Isn't that cool?
It is.
And we use, see in quotes there, but it's really cool what they were able to do.
Right.
In this particular story with this woman who had her vision at one point up till like the age of 17, then lost her vision and became pregnant around 30, and she wanted to, and her doctor produced basically a 3D image of the ultrasound so that she could feel it. There was Braille on it, and it was just a very neat experience and something that's a great tool for the pro-life movement.
Absolutely, I thought so as well. I was actually able to speak earlier today with Lynn Grandon, the director of the Respect Life office at the Archdiocese of Denver. She's also the executive director of Lighthouse Women's Center. Let's take a look at what she had to say. Lynn, as always, it's so great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So this story, it was very touching. It was really a very sweet story. But can you tell us a little bit about the significance of women being able to see their ultrasound? Why was this so impactful for this woman?
You know, oftentimes, especially first pregnancy, women have no idea what's going on inside. They have an idea, and but the pregnancy is not real to them. And it might just be a line on a stick, kind of an ethereal idea. But when you show them an ultrasound and they actually see a little human being moving around and being playful and doing incredible things that they never expected, that's when reality really hits them. I've never seen a boring reaction to someone's first ultrasound. There's many times tears, shock, gasping, because maternal instinct kicks in.
Yeah. Absolutely. When we're talking about the impact of ultrasounds on women, can you tell us any stories that you've had maybe at Lighthouse or other places where pregnant women see their ultrasound? How is it affecting them?
Yeah, you know, our specific ministry mostly deals with abortion vulnerable women. So for them, this is a very impactful time. They're very stressed, very afraid, but I think some interesting reactions that I have seen are maybe teens that have postponed telling their family, so the baby's grown a lot more than they have any idea of. So I have seen teens, when we begin to scan, and they'll cry out, "What is that?" Because they'll maybe see the baby's spine right there, and that's so unique and surprising to them. The first baby I ever saved from abortion was a 16-year-old girl who had been in denial. So her baby was 13 or 14 weeks, and immediately when we put the probe on her belly and began to look, the baby went like this, very distinctly. And this precious little girl began to weep, and she went, "She's waving at me." I mean, it's quite amazing what happens. So those are just two stories.
I'm sure, even for women who are expecting the pregnancy and who know that the baby's there and who are, you know, aware of everything, it's a very powerful, very touching moment. So I can just imagine that moment of realization when somebody who maybe was more abortion-minded realizes, "Oh my goodness, that's a baby." Very powerful.
Yes, because we sadly know that abortion centers do have to use ultrasound often, but they do turn the screen away so the women cannot see the baby, because they know that that maternal instinct will kick in. So that often can be difficult for us if we're scanning a girl that's maybe in that first trimester. If she is maybe 8 weeks and we show her that little baby moving, we've had them begin to weep and say, "Wait a minute, you're saying there's really a baby in there?" And I'm saying, "I don't have to say anything. You can just see. You see the little heart beating, you see the baby moving." And the difficulty will be that they'll say, "You know, I was across the street last year and I was this far along and they said there was nothing in there." And then the reality that they did take the life of a child hits them, and then we have to send them to post-abortion counseling. Yeah, so it's two-sided.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do at Lighthouse? What exactly do you do for a woman who comes through your doors?
We will give her the medical help that she needs right during that crisis. We'll make sure that she is pregnant, and if she's at least 6 weeks along, we can give her ultrasound imaging free at no charge. And then we will plug her into anything from A to Z that she needs through our continuum of care that can help her all the way through the pregnancy, plug her into medical needs, plug her into if there's domestic abuse, any kind of counseling, you name it. That's our services for them.
That's wonderful. The ultrasound at 6 weeks, that's so early. A lot of women are maybe just realizing that they're pregnant or
That's
only
right.
recently have. What do they see that early, the ultrasound? What is the baby looking like?
The baby's very small, but you can see the little heart beating. Because hearts begin to beat in the human body 18 to 21 days after conception. So at 6 weeks, it is visible. And that's what kind of stops women and their boyfriends or their husband or whatever in their tracks to see there's actually a new human being growing right there.
Absolutely. This video, one thing that struck me about it, it was actually a Huggies commercial, kind of an extended commercial.
Yes.
But it was a true story about this woman, and it wasn't trying to be political. I don't think it was trying to take a strong pro-life stance, but it ended up doing that just naturally. It kind of showed just this heartwarming scene, and it really does touch your heart. And the baby's talking about the woman's talking about the baby's baby's nose and the baby's hands.
Yes.
Do you think there's something innate in us that recognizes this being as a human without, you know, trying to push any political message? Is that just an innate realization in us?
That's the maternal instinct. Whenever we go into schools and talk about that, we'll say little things related to things like that, and all of the girls in the room go, "Oh." You can't turn that off in a woman. That's part of who we are.
Absolutely. Well, I think this ultrasound technology is great, and I think it's a big stride for the pro-life movement and for helping inform women about their pregnancies. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about this?
I think that as technology continues to progress, as we have with 3D ultrasound imaging, and now the technology for that dear woman on the 3D structural molding, all of these things are going to continue to affirm the humanity of the unborn.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Wow, great discussion that you guys had. I really like that. I love also one of the things that I think is really powerful for the pro-life movement, and something that she actually had brought in that we didn't really discuss, or y'all didn't really discuss on the last segment, was just the visual of the stages of development. We kind of talked about it in one of our earlier stories on this episode, and just being able to understand what that human being looks like at each development of every stage. And we'll have a picture up on the screen for you to take a look. But she had a really great model that showed the progression, the development of a baby at each of the steps.
Yeah,
along
starting
each of the
with
weeks.
7 weeks, which is so early. And Lynn said they actually can do the ultrasound as early as 6 weeks, and you can see the heartbeat. And so that's just incredible to me. And in this particular story, the woman was 20 weeks pregnant, which I thought was interesting because the 20-week abortion ban that we were talking about earlier. And that the baby is so developed. You can see in the little model, you know, the nose and the eyes and the hands. It's such a developed baby.
Absolutely.
And so I think the medical models are absolutely saving lives. And the ultrasounds, this is huge. 23 states have some kind of law on ultrasounds before an abortion, and I think that's great because it gives the woman the opportunity to see her child and to know that this is a child before she decides to have an abortion. And the pro-abortion movement fights that so much.
They fight it big time.
Which, how is that pro-woman or pro-knowledge or informed consent? They're just, you know, they don't want the woman to have that opportunity to see that baby.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. It's all about information and knowledge, and that's a thing that's shocking, and it really shows their true colors, that they aren't trying to give all kinds of different options and everything. What they really want to do is focus on the option of abortion, and they don't want to have to be required to have an ultrasound or anything for a number of different reasons, but all of which are unjustified in my opinion. But I just think it's also ironic that a blind woman can see that this is a baby. Yet those of us with sight, right, that are pro-abortion still do not believe, even though they see. Yeah. All right, stay tuned. We have one more story coming up after the break. Welcome back to Heroic Media. In our final story, a new traffic initiative in Vienna, Austria will replace the walk, don't walk signs at 49 intersections with images of same-sex couples instead of the traditional stick figures. So, I don't know of another initiative like this in the world. I just might not have that piece of information, but when I read this one, I was like, what? This was the first time I had heard of such a thing happening. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that a spokesperson for the city said the following about this. And they said that this is targeted at raising awareness for traffic safety. So, they're not trying to push any, their moral beliefs about same-sex marriage or anything like that. They're just trying to raise awareness for traffic safety so that they can reduce the number of car accidents.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I thought this was very interesting that they chose to do this. It's temporary, but I think it just shows, it's just one example of the very strong push for this. There really is a very strong public push for this. And you can see just within a few years, it's gone from something that people were very much divided about and something that there was sort of a discussion about to something where it's absolutely not acceptable in society to hold a certain view, namely the view opposed to same-sex marriage. And just in the last few years, you've had very prominent politicians, you know, President Obama, Vice President Biden, Hillary Clinton, all of them previously were opposed to same-sex marriage. Bill Clinton is the one that signed the original Defense of Marriage Act in '93. And so you have, in the last few years, it's just this radical shift to where your view is not respected if you're opposed to this. And it's very public, and it's very open. It's being taught in schools. There's only one right view according to society, and there's no room for discussion or debate. If you disagree, you're a bigot.
We're going to shut down your business. We're going to force you. You're going to pull your tax exemption. We're going to do whatever. You know, there's a lot of repercussions. So you're right, and this is a kind of in-your-face example, I think. And obviously, it has to do with more than just raising awareness about traffic accidents, right? And what it's replacing too isn't even, it's a stick figure. It doesn't have any discussion about marriage, like traditional marriage or anything, right? So they're totally adding on to what was already there before. They could have brought more awareness to it by making the signs still stick figures, but maybe different colors that are more colorful, kind of like they did, right? But they didn't have to impose the whole same-sex marriage thing, you know, discussion. But
with little hearts on the...
Yeah, with little hearts. There's like little hearts on the little bodies that are walking across holding hands, and little hearts floating above.
Yeah, it was kind of odd for a traffic...
Yeah, it was. Like, why do you need to put that into a traffic signal? Like, that's all I could think about. And, you know, it's just another way I think that, that the... pro same-sex movement, or whatever you want to call it, same-sex marriage movement, is kind of making things almost subconscious, because they want to make it so normal and that you see it every day. I think that it just becomes a part of, oh yeah, that's the way it is. And this is just another way of doing that. And also the spokesman for the city said that this is also pegged to the Eurovision Song Contest and the AIDS charity Life Ball in Vienna. And so apparently before there was it's a song contest thing, and an Austrian transgender woman won last year. So I don't know how exactly that ties into them doing this with the traffic signs, but it's obviously related in some fashion. Right. And so yeah, hopefully we don't see anything like this here in America. But yeah, it was kind of shocking to me when I saw it. I was like, wow.
Yeah, it was an interesting story.
Yeah, you think of like billboards and stuff, but not maybe traffic signs.
Yeah, it would almost be distracting.
Yeah. All right, that's it for this week on Heroic Media. Please join us next week for all the up-to-date news on the pro-life issues that matter to you. Please feel free to write to us with any comments, questions, or news tips at news@heroicmedia.org. And please visit our website at heroicmedianews.org, where you can check out more stories like the ones we discussed on this episode. That's it for this week. Until next time, keep us in your prayers. God bless.